I'm Rachel, 28 female. I live in a quiet suburban town in a small two-bedroom house I was so proud to buy with my own savings. As a financial analyst, my life is built on order, logic, and predictability, which is why the chaos my own brother unleashed on me was so devastating. My brother used my safe, quiet home as a drop point for illegal goods, leading to a terrifying police raid that shattered my world and nearly destroyed my future. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My life before everything imploded was meticulously organized. I thrived on routine. My alarm went off at 6:00 a.m. I was at the gym by 6:30, at my desk by 8:30, and home by 6:00 p.m. My job as a financial analyst for a mid-sized investment firm demanded precision, and I happily obliged. Spreadsheets were my sanctuary, market trends were my gospel. My house was a reflection of that order. Every throw pillow was perfectly fluffed, every book on my shelf was alphabetized by author, and my kitchen counters were always gleaming. It was a peaceful, stable existence I had worked incredibly hard to build for myself, a stark contrast to the turbulent household we grew up in. Our parents were loving but perpetually stressed about money, which I think is why I ran so hard in the opposite direction, toward financial security. My younger brother, Ethan, however, seemed to have absorbed a different lesson. While I craved stability, he chased jackpots. At 26, he was a self-proclaimed day trader and freelance coder, which was a fancy way of saying he spent most of his days in his messy apartment, staring at screens and chasing high-risk, high-reward schemes. He was charming, I'll give him that. Ethan had our mother's easy smile and a way of talking that could make the most ludicrous ideas sound plausible. He was always just one big win away from changing his life. He'd call me, buzzing with excitement about some new cryptocurrency or a coding gig that was supposedly going to be his big break, and I'd listen, offering cautious advice that he would promptly ignore. Our relationship was a repeating cycle. He'd get into some kind of trouble, usually financial, and I'd be the one to bail him out. A few $100s for rent here, $1,000 for a car repair there. Each time, he'd swear it was the last time, that he was on the verge of something huge. And each time, I'd believe him, or at least, I'd want to. Because despite his recklessness, he was my brother. The goofy kid who used to build blanket forts with me in the living room. I held onto that image, even as the reality of who he was becoming grew more and more disappointing. My best friend, Jessica, was my sounding board for all things Ethan. We'd been inseparable since college, and she understood the dynamic perfectly. "He's using you, Ratch," she'd say gently over our weekly brunch. "He knows you have a soft spot for him, and he exploits it." I knew she was right, but it was hard to accept. Cutting him off felt like abandoning a part of myself. The trouble that led to the raid started subtly. About a month before my life was turned upside down, Ethan called me in a panic. He said he had ordered some expensive new computer components for a big coding project, but that his apartment building had a problem with package thieves. "Can I just get them sent to your place, Ratch, please?" he begged. "It's super secure and you're home most evenings. I'll come pick them up the day they arrive. I can't risk this stuff getting stolen. It's worth thousands." It sounded plausible. My neighborhood was safe, and package theft was a real issue in his part of the city. I hesitated for a moment, a tiny flicker of unease in my gut, but I pushed it down. It was just a package. What could be the harm? "Okay, fine," I agreed. "But you have to promise me you'll pick it up immediately. I don't want it cluttering up my living room." He was effusive with his thanks, promising he'd be there the second it was delivered. A few days later, a medium-sized, plain brown box arrived. As promised, Ethan was at my door within an hour to collect it. He was giddy with excitement, thanking me over and over. He didn't open it in front of me, just loaded it into his car and drove off. It seemed harmless enough. A week after that, it happened again. Another package, slightly larger this time, then another the following week. It was becoming a pattern. "Ethan, this is getting to be a habit," I told him over the phone. "This is the last one. I'm not your personal mailbox." I know, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice laced with that practiced sincerity. "This is for a client build. The project is almost done, and then I'll be flush. I'll take you out for the best dinner of your life to thank you." The promise of him finally succeeding, of him being able to stand on his own 2 feet, was the bait I always took. It was the future I desperately wanted for him. So I agreed, one last time. The final package was scheduled to arrive on a Tuesday. I remember the day vividly. It was a beautiful spring morning. The sun was streaming through my kitchen window as I made my coffee, feeling content. I had a big presentation at work that day, one I had been preparing for weeks. My life was on track. My career was flourishing. My home was my sanctuary. I had no idea that in a few short hours, a simple cardboard box with my name and address on it would bring a battering ram to my front door and reduce my carefully constructed world to rubble. I had trusted my brother, and that trust was about to become the weapon used against me. The storm was coming, and I was standing right in its path, completely oblivious. The presentation at work had gone better than I could have hoped. My boss was impressed, and my colleagues were congratulatory. I left the office that Tuesday evening with a sense of accomplishment, feeling light and optimistic. I was humming along to the radio during my drive home, thinking about what I'd make for dinner. As I turned onto my quiet, tree-lined street, I felt that familiar sense of peace settle over me. This was my haven, the place where the stress of the world couldn't touch me. I saw a few unfamiliar cars parked along the curb, but I didn't think much of it. My neighbors sometimes had guests over. I pulled into my driveway, grabbed my work bag from the passenger seat, and walked toward my front door, fumbling for my keys. That's when my world tilted on its axis. Before my key could even touch the lock, my front door burst inward with a deafening crash, splintering the frame. I stumbled back, my heart launching into my throat as several figures in heavy tactical gear, armed with rifles, stormed out of my house and surrounded me on my own porch. "Police! Get on the ground, now!" The command was screamed, not spoken. It was so loud, so violent that I couldn't process it. My mind went completely blank. My bag dropped from my shoulder, spilling its contents across the concrete. My keys clattered to the ground. I just stood there, frozen in sheer, unadulterated terror. One of the officers grabbed me, spun me around, and slammed me against the brick wall of my own home. The rough texture scraped my cheek. "I said on the ground," he yelled directly into my ear. My legs gave out, and I crumpled onto the cold driveway. A heavy boot pressed into my back, and my hands were yanked behind me, the cold, sharp click of handcuffs biting into my wrists. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion. Was this a mistake? A prank? Was I dreaming? I could hear neighbors peering out of their windows, their faces pale masks of shock. The humiliation was a physical sensation, a hot wave that washed over me even as I shivered with fear. "What's happening? You have the wrong house." I managed to choke out, my face pressed against the dusty pavement. "Ma'am, we have a warrant to search this residence," a calmer voice said from somewhere above me. "We'll sort this out down at the station." They hauled me to my feet, my muscles protesting, and frog-marched me toward one of the unmarked cars. As they pushed my head down to get me into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of my house. My beautiful, orderly home. The door was a gaping wound. Officers were moving inside, their flashlights cutting through the dimming evening light. They were tearing apart my sanctuary. The ride to the station was a blur. I sat in the back of the police car, the plastic seat cold against my skin, and tried to make sense of the nightmare I'd been thrown into. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Did I have an unpaid ticket? Was there a case of mistaken identity? Nothing made sense. The quiet professionalism of the officers only made it more terrifying. This wasn't a mistake. They were confident they were in the right place. At the station, I was led into a small, gray interrogation room. The air was stale, and the metal chair was cold. A man in a rumpled suit who introduced himself as Detective Miller sat down across from me. He had tired eyes but a sharp, focused gaze that seemed to see right through me. He slid a file across the table. "Rachel," he began, his voice low and even. "We've been monitoring a series of suspicious deliveries to your address. Packages containing illegal, high-end electronics, stolen and modified for resale on the black market. He paused, letting the words sink in. My blood ran cold. Packages, the computer parts for Ethan. My mouth went dry. No, I whispered. That's not possible. Those were for my brother. They were computer components for his work. Detective Miller leaned forward, his expression unchanging. Your brother, Ethan? The one with a history of online fraud and a sealed juvenile record for theft. I stared at him, my world shrinking to the F. Our walls of that tiny room, I didn't even know about a sealed record. Ethan had always been reckless, but this was something else entirely. The last package, the one delivered today, was intercepted, Miller continued. It contained 10 stolen, top-of-the-line graphics cards worth over $20,000, and it was addressed to you at your house. He opened the file and pushed a photograph toward me. It was the shipping label. My name, my address, printed in clear, bold letters. Suddenly, the phone calls from Ethan, his desperation, his insistence on using my address, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. It wasn't about package thieves. It was about him needing a clean address, a safe house. He hadn't just asked for a favor, he had made me an accomplice without my knowledge. The terror I felt on my front porch was replaced by a new, sickening emotion: betrayal. The cold, calculated nature of it was staggering. He had risked everything for me, my home, my career, my freedom, to protect himself. He had built a wall of my life to hide his crimes behind. In that sterile interrogation room, under the hum of the fluorescent lights, the brother I thought I knew, the one I had protected and supported, vanished. In his place was a stranger, a criminal who had casually tossed me to the wolves to save himself. The foundation of my life hadn't just been cracked, it had been dynamited. The hours I spent at the police station were the longest of my life. I was questioned, fingerprinted, and photographed. I felt like a common criminal, stripped of my identity and dignity. I told Detective Miller everything I knew, my voice shaking as I recounted the phone calls with Ethan, his excuses about package thieves, and my naive acceptance of his story. I explained my job, my clean record, my entire life, trying to paint a picture of someone who couldn't possibly be involved in a black market electronics ring. To his credit, Miller listened patiently, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. So, you're telling me your brother, a known risk-taker, had tens of thousands of dollars in stolen goods sent to your house, multiple times, and you never once suspected anything was wrong? He asked, his tone flat. I trusted him, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He's my brother. It sounded so flimsy, so foolish, even to my own ears. Trust was not a valid legal defense. They held me for nearly 6 hours before finally releasing me, pending further investigation. They had the intercepted package, but without concrete evidence tying me directly to the purchase or sale of the goods, they didn't have enough to charge me. Yet. Don't leave town, Miller warned as a uniformed officer led me out. We'll be in touch. The police drove me back to my house. The tactical team was gone, but yellow police tape was stretched across my splintered front door, a stark announcement of my shame to the entire neighborhood. Inside, my home was unrecognizable. They had executed the search warrant with brutal efficiency. Cushions were torn from the sofa, drawers were emptied onto the floor, my alphabetized books were swept from their shelves. My sanctuary had been violated, ransacked, and tainted. I sank onto the floor in the middle of the chaos, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and finally let myself break down. The sobs came from a deep, primal place, a mixture of fear, rage, and a profound, heart-shattering sense of betrayal. After the tears subsided, a cold fury began to set in. I pulled out my phone and dialed Ethan's number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Hey, you've reached Ethan. Leave a message. His cheerful, carefree voice was like a knife in my gut. I called again. Voicemail and again, voicemail. He was ghosting me, he knew. He must have known the package was intercepted, and he was cutting me loose, leaving me to face the consequences alone. I sent him a barrage of texts. The police raided my house, Ethan. They arrested me. They think I'm involved in your scheme. Call me, now. The messages were all marked as delivered, but there was no reply. My next call was to Jessica. She picked up on the first ring. Ratch, what's wrong? It's almost midnight. I told her everything, the words tumbling out in a frantic, jumbled mess. The raid, the arrest, the interrogation, the stolen goods, Ethan's name on the shipping label. Jessica listened without interrupting, her silence a comforting presence on the other end of the line. "I'm coming over," she said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "Don't do anything, just wait for me." 20 minutes later, she was there, navigating her way through the debris in my living room. She took one look at my face, wrapped me in a hug, and just held me. "We're going to fix this," she promised. With Jessica there, my panic began to recede, replaced by a grim determination. We spent the next hour talking through the situation. As a social M. Eddie, a manager, Jessica was incredibly savvy about the digital world. "He's a day trader and a coder, right?" she asked. "His whole life is online. If he's a ghost in the real world, he's left a trail in the digital one. We just have to find it." That night, sitting amongst the ruins of my home, the first seeds of a plan began to form. The legal system saw me as a potential accomplice. My brother saw me as disposable collateral. I was alone in this. The police were building a case, and my brother's silence was my indictment. If I was going to prove my innocence, I couldn't rely on anyone else. I had to do it myself. The next morning, I called a lawyer Jessica recommended. He was expensive, but he was good. He listened to my story and laid out the stark reality. "The prosecution's case is circumstantial, but it's strong," he explained. "The goods were delivered to your address under your name. The burden of proof will be on us to show you had no knowledge of the contents. The best way to do that is to give them the person who did, your brother." My objective was clear. I needed to find concrete proof that Ethan was the mastermind, that he had manipulated me and used my address without my knowledge. My fury toward him was now a laser-focused, ice-cold resolve. He had underestimated me. He saw me as the responsible, gullible big sister who would always clean up his messes. He thought he could ruin my life and just walk away. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The deceit ran deeper than I could have imagined. I started with a simple Google search of his name and the various online handles I knew he used. What I found was a tangle of posts on obscure tech forums and cryptocurrency message boards. He was bragging, using thinly veiled language, about his import-export business, about flipping high-end components for massive profits. He was arrogant. He felt untouchable, and his arrogance was going to be his downfall. He had left a trail of digital breadcrumbs, and I was going to follow it all the way back to him, exposing his deceit for the world and the police to see. The days following the raid were a living nightmare. I was placed on administrative leave from my job, a gentle but firm, "We need to sort this out before you can handle client portfolios." My boss was sympathetic, but the implication was clear. I was a liability. The trust I had spent years building in my career was evaporating. My neighbors, who used to greet me with friendly waves, now averted their eyes, whispering behind their hands as I walked to my car. My home felt like a crime scene, a constant reminder of the violation. I spent hours cleaning, trying to restore order, but the feeling of being unsafe lingered. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of anxiety through me. My brother, Ethan, remained a ghost. His phone went straight to voicemail, and he didn't reply to any of my texts or emails. It was a cowardly, calculated silence. He was waiting for the dust to settle, assuming, as always, that I would take the fall. That was his fatal miscalculation. My fear and shame were being forged into something harder, something sharper, a relentless drive for justice. Jessica became my co-conspirator. We turned my dining room table, now cleared of police debris, into our command center. Laptops, notebooks, and endless cups of coffee covered its surface. My background as a financial analyst proved surprisingly useful. I was trained to find patterns in chaos, to follow money, to analyze data until it revealed its secrets. This was just a different kind of audit. Jessica, with her expertise in social media and online behavior, was the perfect partner. "People like your brother are sloppy," she explained, scrolling through forum pages. "They crave validation. They can't resist bragging, even if it's anonymously." She was right. We started by mapping out Ethan's entire digital footprint. We compiled a list of every username I knew he used. Trade King, Crypto Coder 26, Byte Bandit. Then, Jessica worked her magic, using search operators and website crawling tools to find linked accounts on different platforms. It was like pulling on a single thread that began to unravel a massive, tangled web. We found him on a Discord server for high-risk crypto trading. Under the name Byte Bandit, he was a minor celebrity. He boasted about his foolproof system for acquiring and reselling computer hardware. He talked about his logistics network, which was a laughable euphemism for his scheme. In one conversation, we hit the jackpot. Another user asked him, "Aren't you worried about getting shipments of that value sent to your place?" Ethan, as Byte Bandit, replied with sickening arrogance, "Nah, I use a clean drop, my sister's place. She's a total square, straight-laced analyst. Cops would never look twice at her. She has no idea, it's the perfect cover." My breath caught in my chest. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my retinas. It was there, in black and white. A confession. He had not only admitted to the crime, but had also openly mocked me, reducing my identity to a convenient shield for his illegal activities. I took a screenshot, then another and another, documenting the entire conversation. We saved the chat logs, the user IDs, everything. The digital trail didn't stop there. I remembered the payments I had made to him over the years, the bailouts for rent and car trouble. I went through my bank statements, cross-referencing the dates of my transfers with his online activity. The pattern was damning. The day after I sent him $1,000 for what he claimed was a down payment on a new server for a coding project, he made a post on a private forum about acquiring his first batch of merchandise. My money, the money I worked hard for, had been the seed capital for his criminal enterprise. The betrayal felt physical, like a punch to the stomach. He hadn't just used my address, he had used my love and my financial support to build the very operation that was now threatening to destroy me. We kept digging. Jessica found his profile on a marketplace site on the dark web, a place where stolen goods were frequently fenced. The seller profile was anonymous, but the pictures of the graphics cards for sale were taken on a distinctive-looking desk. A custom-built wooden desk with a unique grain pattern and a small, telltale coffee stain in the corner. I recognized it instantly. It was a desk I had helped him build in his apartment 2 summers ago. I still had pictures of it on my phone from that day. We now had a direct visual link between the anonymous seller and my brother. We compiled everything into a meticulously organized digital folder. Screenshots of the Discord conversations, chat logs with timestamps, my bank statements aligned with his forum posts, and the side-by-side comparison of the desk from my photos and the one in the dark web listings. It was a mountain of evidence, a clear and undeniable narrative of his guilt and my innocence. After 3 days of relentless work, we had a complete picture of his operation. He was buying stolen electronics from an online source, using cryptocurrency to obscure the payments. He was having them shipped to my clean address to avoid suspicion. Then, he would collect the packages, list the items on dark web marketplaces, and sell them for a huge profit. My role in his plan was simple. I was the perfect scapegoat. If a package was ever intercepted, the trail would lead directly to my door, giving him plausible deniability. He could simply claim he knew nothing about it, leaving me to face the police with my name on the box. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just reckless, it was sociopathic. He had a contingency plan, and I was it. But now I had my own plan. I wasn't just going to hand this evidence to the police. That would be too easy. That would get me out of trouble, but it wouldn't deliver the justice he truly deserved. He had subjected me to terror and humiliation. He had tried to ruin my life. Simply walking away wasn't enough. He needed to feel a fraction of the fear I had felt. He needed to be caught, not by the police acting on an anonymous tip, but by a trap he walked into himself. My investigation was over. Now, the planning would begin. With a comprehensive dossier of evidence against Ethan, my initial instinct was to march straight into Detective Miller's office and slam it on his desk. It would exonerate me, clear my name, and put the police on his trail. But as I sat there, looking at the screen captures of him calling me a total square and the perfect cover, a different feeling took root. It wasn't just about proving my innocence anymore, it was about making him accountable in a way that he would never forget. Handing the evidence over felt passive. He would be arrested, he'd get a lawyer, and the system would process him. but he would never have to face me. He would never have to confront the reality of what he had done to his own sister. The terror of the raid, the shame of being cuffed on my own driveway, the violation of my home, he was insulated from all of it. I wanted him to feel that vulnerability. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in, just like I had. That's when the idea for a trap began to solidify. I didn't just want to give the police evidence of his past crimes, I wanted to help them catch him in the act of committing a new one. I needed to create a scenario where he would willingly expose himself, a situation so tempting he couldn't resist. My plan had to be precise and legally sound. I couldn't break the law to catch him. My first step was a carefully considered visit to Detective Miller. I didn't bring my mountain of evidence, not yet. I went to him with a single piece of it, the most damning one, the screenshot of the Discord chat where Bite Bandit admitted to using his sister's clean address. "I've been doing some digging," Aid, my voice steady and professional, channeling the financial analyst within me. "I believe this user, Bite Bandit, is my brother Ethan. He's talking about his operation right here, and he admits to using my house as a drop point without my knowledge." Miller studied the printout, his expression unreadable. He compared the username to the notes in my file. "This is compelling, Rachel," he admitted, "but it's not a smoking gun. We need to definitively link your brother to this online persona and, more importantly, to the physical goods." "I know," I replied, "and I think I know how to do that. What if another package was scheduled for delivery?" Miller raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "He thinks I'm still the perfect, clueless cover," I explained, leaning forward. "He's been ignoring my calls, probably waiting for things to cool down. If I reached out to him, not with anger but with concern, and told him another package had arrived, what do you think he would do?" The detective was silent for a moment, processing my words. I was proposing to be the bait. "He'd come for it," Miller said, finishing my thought. "He'd have to. He couldn't risk leaving it with you." "Exactly," I confirmed. "We set up a controlled delivery. You provide a dummy package, identical to the previous ones. I'll call him, play the part of the worried sister, and tell him to come get this thing off my hands. When he takes possession of the package, you'll have him, in the act, with the evidence in his hands." It was a risky idea. It required me to contact the person who had betrayed me and pretend everything was normal. But it was also perfect. It would be his own greed and arrogance that would seal his fate. Detective Miller was intrigued. A controlled operation like this was cleaner and provided irrefutable evidence. He agreed to the plan, on the condition that I follow his instructions to the letter. The police would handle the surveillance and the arrest. My only job was to make the call and lure Ethan to my house. The next few days were spent in careful preparation. The police forensics team created a replica package, complete with a fake shipping label addressed to me and a GPS tracker hidden inside. My house was discreetly fitted with surveillance cameras, covering the front porch and the living room. Undercover officers would be positioned in unmarked cars down the street, ready to move in the moment Ethan took the package. The stage was set. All that was left was the most difficult part, the phone call. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat at my kitchen table, Detective Miller's instructions running through my head. I had to sound worried and a little annoyed, but not suspicious. I had to be the gullible sister he thought I was. I took a deep breath and dialed his number. To my surprise, after weeks of silence, he answered on the second ring. "Ratch." His voice was cautious, wary. "Ethan," I said, forcing a sigh of frustration into my voice. "Finally, I've been trying to reach you. Another one of your packages showed up here." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "What? That's impossible," he said, but I could detect a note of greed overriding his caution. "The project was finished." "Well, apparently not," I snapped, playing my part. "There's a big box on my porch and I want it gone, now, after what happened." I let my voice trail off, feigning anxiety. "What do you mean, after what happened?" he asked, his voice sharp with alarm. "The police were here, Ethan," I said, letting a bit of real panic seep in. They were asking questions about suspicious deliveries in the neighborhood. I was terrified. "I don't know what's in these boxes, and I don't want to know. You need to come get this thing out of my house immediately." The bait was set. By mentioning the police, I had created a sense of urgency. He couldn't risk me getting scared and calling them about this new package. He had to retrieve it himself. Okay, calm down, he said, his tone shifting from suspicion to damage control. Don't do anything. Don't touch it. I'll be there in an hour. Just act normal. Just get here, Ethan, I said, and hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but a cold sense of triumph washed over me. He took the bait. The trap was sprung. Now, all I had to do was wait for the final delivery. The hour I had to wait for Ethan to arrive was the most nerve-wracking of my life. I paced my living room, my eyes constantly darting to the surveillance cameras, which were so well hidden I couldn't even spot them myself. The dummy package sat on my coffee table, an inert but powerful symbol of my brother's impending downfall. It looked exactly like the others, a plain brown box, sealed with packing tape. Outside, unseen, Detective Miller and his team were in position, waiting for the signal. Every passing car on the street made my heart leap. Was it him? My phone buzzed wit. A text from an unknown number, the secure line Miller had given me. He's 2 minutes out. Silver sedan, stay calm, we are ready. I took a deep, shuddering breath and sat on the couch, trying to look as natural as possible. I picked up a magazine, my hands trembling so much I could barely read the words. Then I saw it. The silver sedan pulled into my driveway. My brother, Ethan, got out of the car. He looked different than I remembered. He was thinner, and his usual confident swagger was replaced by a tense, furtive energy. He scanned the street, his eyes darting back and forth, before quickly walking to my front door. The doorbell rang, the sound echoing through the silent house like a gunshot. I walked to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I opened it, and there he was, my brother, the stranger who had ruined my life. "Hey," he said, trying for a casual tone but failing. "You okay?" "No, Ethan, I'm not okay," I said, my voice cold. "I want that thing out of my house." I stepped aside to let him in, my body rigid with tension. He walked past me, and his eyes immediately locked onto the package on the coffee table. A flicker of relief, quickly followed by greed, crossed his face. He saw his prize. He didn't seem to notice the new deadbolt on my splintered door frame or the slight indentation in the carpet where a wire had been run. His focus was entirely on the box. "Look, Ratch, I'm sorry you got spooked," he said, not even looking at me. He was already moving toward the package. "It was just a misunderstanding. The cops were probably just doing a routine canvass of the area." The ease with which he lied was breathtaking. He had no remorse, no guilt. He was only concerned with retrieving his illicit goods. "I don't care what it was," I said, standing by the door, keeping my distance. "Just take it and go. I don't want to be involved in whatever this is. We're done, Ethan." He barely registered my words. He bent down and picked up the box, tucking it under his arm. Yeah, okay," he said dismissively, already turning to leave. "It's the last one anyway. You won't have to worry about it again." He held the GPS tracker in his hands. He had taken possession. That was the signal. As he reached the front door, he paused and finally looked at me. For a fleeting second, I saw a glimmer of the little brother I used to know, a flicker of something that might have been regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that familiar, self-serving smirk. "Thanks for this, by the way," he said. "You were a real lifesaver." Those were the last words he spoke as a free man. As his hand touched the doorknob, the front door was kicked open for the second time in as many weeks. But this time, I wasn't the one caught by surprise. Detective Miller and 2 uniformed officers flooded the entryway. "Police! Drop the package and put your hands in the air." Ethan froze, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His eyes darted from the police to me and back again. The package dropped from his arm, hitting the floor with a dull thud. In that moment, he understood. He saw the cold, unwavering resolve in my eyes and knew this was no coincidence. This was not bad luck. This was a reckoning. "Rachel, what did you do?" he whispered, his voice cracking as the officers pushed him against the wall and cuffed his hands behind his back. I didn't answer. I just stood there and watched as they read him his rights, the same words that had been read to me just days before. I watched as they led him out of my house, his confident smirk replaced by a look of utter disbelief and betrayal. It was a mirror image of my own arrest, but this time, the cuffs were on the right wrists. Detective Miller stayed behind for a moment after they had taken Ethan away. The surveillance team was already discreetly removing their equipment. "You were very brave, Rachel," he said, his voice holding a new level of respect. "You did the right thing." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of emptiness. The adrenaline that had been fueling me for days was starting to fade, leaving a hollow ache in its place. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we use the evidence you gathered, combined with catching him red-handed, to build an ironclad case," Miller explained. "He'll be charged with trafficking stolen property, and with the evidence of him intentionally using you as a scapegoat, they might add more. Your name will be cleared completely. You'll be listed as a cooperating witness." He gave me a final nod and left, closing the door quietly behind him. I was alone in my house again. The silence was absolute. The package, the instrument of my brother's undoing, still sat on the floor. It was over. The trap had been successful. The confrontation was done. I had won. But standing there in the quiet aftermath, I didn't feel the elation I had expected. I just felt the profound, chilling weight of the price I had to pay to get my life back. The aftermath of Ethan's arrest was not a sudden, triumphant victory parade. It was a slow, arduous process of untangling the mess he had made of my life. The first step was the legal exoneration. With my dossier of evidence and the undeniable proof of him being caught with the dummy package, the case against me was officially dropped. Detective Miller called me personally to deliver the news. "It's over, Rachel. You're completely in the clear." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. The dark cloud of suspicion that had been hanging over my head had finally dissipated. The charges against Ethan, however, were extensive. He was faced with multiple counts of trafficking stolen goods, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence I had provided, especially the chat logs where he admitted to knowingly using me as a scapegoat, made his defense all but impossible. He took a plea bargain to avoid a longer sentence, but it was still substantial. He was sentenced to 3 years in a minimum security prison. Our parents were devastated. They couldn't comprehend how one of their children could do this to the other. They tried to position themselves as neutral parties, caught between two warring kids, but I couldn't accept that. "He didn't just make a mistake," I told them during a tense family meeting. "He made a calculated decision to destroy my life to protect his own. There is no neutral ground here." It caused a painful rift in our family, one that has yet to fully heal. They love him, and I understand that, but they will never understand the depth of his betrayal. Returning to work was another challenge. My boss called me into his office the day after my name was cleared. He apologized profusely for my suspension and offered me my job back, effective immediately. While my colleagues were supportive, I could still feel a subtle shift. I was no longer just Rachel, the reliable financial analyst. I was now Rachel, the woman whose house was raided by a SWAT team. The story lingered in the office corridors, a piece of gossip that had become part of my professional identity. It took months of hard work, of keeping my head down and delivering exceptional results to slowly rebuild the trust and reputation I had lost. But the biggest challenge was rebuilding my sense of security. My house, once my sanctuary, felt tainted for a long time. I had the front door and its frame completely replaced. I installed a state-of-the-art security system, but the psychological scars remained. For months, I would jump at unexpected noises. The sound of a car pulling up outside would send a spike of anxiety through me. Jessica was my rock through all of it. She helped me repaint the living room, as if a new coat of paint could cover up the bad memories. She stayed over many nights, filling the silence with laughter and mindless TV shows, helping me feel safe in my own home again. Slowly, very slowly, the house began to feel like mine again. The trust I had lost in my brother, however, was gone forever. It was a fundamental pillar of my life that had been ground into dust. I used to believe in the inherent good of people, especially family. That innocence was gone, replaced by a more cautious, guarded perspective on the world. I learned a hard lesson. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. A few months ago, I received a letter from Ethan, sent from prison. It was filled with apologies and remorse. He wrote about how he had time to think, how he realized the gravity of what he had done, and how he hoped that one day I could find it in my heart to forgive him. I read the letter, folded it neatly, and put it away in a box. I don't know if his remorse is genuine or just another form of manipulation. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Forgiveness is a complex thing. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine, to let go of the last vestiges of anger he has over me. But forgiving does not mean forgetting. It does not mean reconciliation. There is no going back to the way things were. I will never allow him back into my life. The trust is irrevocably broken. I have rebuilt my life from the wreckage he left behind. My career is back on track. My home is my sanctuary once more. I am stronger, more resilient, and more discerning than I was before. I paid a terrible price for my brother's deceit, but in doing so, I discovered a strength within myself I never knew I had. I learned that I am capable of fighting for myself, of seeking my own justice, and of rebuilding from the ashes. My quiet, orderly life is back, but it's different now. It's a quiet that I fought for, a peace that I earned. And that makes it all the more precious.